everyone, and welcome back to the Macro Podcast, where we have a connection and conversation about bridging that gap between the military as well as the community in Hawaii. And I'm really happy to have Noe Kalipi over here, and just to talk stories and learn a little bit more about how we can improve that connection. And it's been really interesting for me to be part of this because I'm learning so much. And before we even jump down, you're kind of giving a whole diagram of this whole structure of how the different departments and different areas work together. But before we get into there, can you just share a little bit about your where your position is now before we kind of take away back?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I currently serve as a senior advisor for something called the Hawaii Coordination Cell, which is an office in the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Energy Installations and Environment.
Oh, wow.
So this is an office at the Office of Secretary of Defense level that coordinates across all of the military services to have a comprehensive view of all of the activities of the military in Hawaii.
Yeah, and that's something that has been fascinating for me, is seeing all the different pieces that go along within the Indo-Pacific area, across the oceans. But before we get into there, can we just kind of take a step back and talk about where you grew up in Hawaii and actually what led you down this whole career path into public service?
Sure. So I grew up in Hilo. I'm born and raised there, still live there. And the pathway to public service really is, I think, through my grandfather. My grandfather, Jimmy Correa, was a very well-known baseball coach. So I grew up on the baseball field with him and all my uncles, and then also with my auntie, who was Leilani Southward, who was the first fast pitch player to be drafted to the pros.
Oh, wow.
But during election season, people always wanted the coaches to endorse the candidates, right? And so I grew up with my grandfather waving on the side of the road, always working with other families, doing all kind of other stuff. So that's kind of the pathway.
And you just took me down memory lane right there, because that's kind of how my family was.
Yeah.
I grew up, born and raised Kailua side on Oahu. And same thing, had all the coaches running for elections, being Kailua, standing on the side of the road. We all wearing our baseball uniforms.
Right.
And I think that is also the part of me seeing like public service and being out there within the community and trying to make sure that we're trying to strengthen the community and bring people together.
Right.
So it's kind of funny how we kind of connect with that little story, And from there, you've gone through so many different layers, right? You've gone to the Congress, we worked with the Army, and now you're currently with the Secretary of Defense office. How has all those experiences build up your view of what leadership and service is?
Well, I've been really lucky throughout my career to work with really good bosses. And I would say I was very fortunate to work with Senator Daniel Keakaka. And so being a young staffer with him and having him give the lessons of, it doesn't matter if we're in Washington, D.C. or we're in Capitol Hill, we're going to behave with aloha. Figure it out. Don't forget where you're from. And even if nobody else is behaving with aloha, we are going to show that it's possible, right? So in terms of the daily mantra of how I do that, it's really from working with Senator Akaka and facing the challenges, the criticism, and always keeping the collective in mind as the priority.
Can you share a moment where it was kind of challenging? Because I can just imagine in situations, especially when you're in DC and so forth, where you come across those challenging moments where you have to kind of remember where you come from. Because I think that's, for anybody from Hawaii, we always got to remind ourselves, wherever we go, right? Like when I went to away for school, my parents always told me, remember where you come from. Wherever you go, make sure you take food, take something, even though they say, no, don't bring it, it's not part of their custom or culture, you still do it because that's who you are.
Yeah, because we always have to represent.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
That we
Everywhere
represent
you go,
Hawaii.
you're Hawaii, no matter where you go.
Right. Others have heard me say this story before, but one of the most prevalent stories I can think of, or experiences I can think of, is as a young staffer, I was staffing Senator Akaka on the Armed Services Committee, and we were going into something called markup. That's when you begin to work on the legislation for the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA. And right before we went into our subcommittee meeting on readiness and management support, another senator from another state, which I won't name, took away all the funding for all of our priorities in Hawaii. So I drafted an amendment that took away that state's funding. And I walked into senator's office and I said, boss, I need you to sign, because the senators have to sign the top right-hand corner of an amendment. And I said, I need you to sign this. We only have 5 minutes. Just sign them and let's go. And he goes, what happened? And because he looked at it and he goes, what is this? Right. And so I explained it and I was still real like, rah! And he goes, sit down. I was like, Senator, we only have 5 minutes. He goes, I said, sit down. I was like, okay. He goes, how's your papa? Same papa. And I said, fine. And he goes, when was the last time you talked to your papa? I said, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago. And he said, how come so long? And I said, because I'm working with you, right? And he said, you know, I remember when your papa, blah, 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 right? And goes down this story. And talked to me for a good 10 minutes until I was in the right frame of mind of remembering, right? And laughing. And he goes, don't worry about that time. I'll go call them. They're going to wait for us. And he goes, okay, Noe, now that you remember all of what we're talking about, explain to me how we're going to do this with Aloha. And I said, we're not, Senator. We're in the United States Senate. This is what they did to us. And this is how we forced their hand. And he goes, no, explain to me how we can do this with Aloha. And I said, well, if we did this and we funded this, but we offered this, and if we collaborated this way, then it could work. And he said, fine, go draft that amendment. I will call the committee. I will tell them we have an amendment coming, and you and I will walk in together and they will accept the amendment. And that was, I think, the clearest example, right? It would have been very easy for him to say, oh, just do it. Somebody took all our funding.
And I think that's such an important thing that, maybe it's just something that we grew up with, is having that time to just sit a little bit, you know? Like, same thing, right? Like, or go to the ocean, go jump in the water. Before you do anything that you know, with getting all these emotions, jump in the water, come back and tell me how you feel again, you know?
Right.
And I think it's sometimes we get so reactive,
Yes.
and we need that person, like that mentor, to be like, okay, wait, let's just pause a little bit, let's think about it, let's remember who we are, go back to our roots, and then figure out how can we make the best of it.
Right.
Because it's easy to just kind of just go bulls all in, right? Like and that's the easy thing to do.
Yes.
A little bit harder when you have to like kind of think about the bigger picture,
Right.
Like how you just did, how you shared, like, oh, I can change things here, change it there. And that's what I always find so interesting when I meet people such as yourself, is that you're able to do that, you know, because sometimes a lot of people, it's harder to just pause when you're in an emotional state of mind, you know, and when it's something that you're so passionate about too. Right. And so, you know, given that, with the whole military presence, and especially now that we're coming back to Hawaii, right? And the military has such a strong presence here, and with this history of both past, present, and future, how do you navigate that whole conversation, right? When you have individuals who have these different perspectives of the military, how do you navigate those conversations?
I think it's most important to listen, first of all, right? As opposed to dismiss. I think many residents feel like they haven't been heard. Right? So we have to create the opportunities to listen. We have to create the space to understand. And we have to be really clear about setting expectations. Hearing and understanding doesn't mean we're going to fully agree on everything. But hopefully we can reach a point where we can agree on the key facts. Because we can disagree about those facts, but we got to at least agree on what the facts are for us to be able to figure out how do we collaboratively move forward, right? So I think listening, being able to acknowledge, setting up the clear expectations, and co-designing an agreement for, is there anything we can share, right? Can we share a love of Hawaii?
And I think that's where one of my conversations lately is like, all the individuals I've been speaking to, they have this love of Hawaii. Even though they may have only been here for like a year or two, they get to see the culture, they get to see the place, and then they see that it is very unique here, you know. And speaking with them, I feel that they understand that. but yet again, it comes with its challenges. There are decisions that have to be made.
Yes.
There are jobs to be done. And I think this is where the work that you're doing right now, right, with the Hawaii
Coordination cell.
right?
Yeah.
It's like, and that's another funny thing. I'm learning all these different acronyms, But the Hawaii Coordination Cell, that they kind of lay that foundation, right? They help out with creating those bridges as well within the military as well as the community.
Yes. So the Hawaii Coordination Cell was created 2 years ago. I only started last year.
Okay.
But it was created because the Department of Defense recognized the need to have an office at the Secretary of Defense level. There's no other Secretary of Defense level office in Hawaii.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Okay.
And what this office does is it allows us to work with the services and work with the people of Hawaii, the community leaders, the business leaders, and then go straight back up to the Office of Secretary of Defense level to coordinate with the people who have jurisdiction. Normally, you work things out here, and then it goes up the chains of command, imagine the game telephone, and then by the time it gets to the different decision makers, it's a little bit different, right?
Okay.
The department understood how important Hawaii was and said, we're going to put in one of our offices there. So my duty station is actually the Pentagon, but I have an office at Fort Stewart. I live in Hilo and I commute. Fort Shafter. So my office is at Fort Shafter. I commute from Hilo because I still live in Hilo. I spend most of my time here now, though. And my bosses are all in the Pentagon. So what that does is it allows the Department of Defense to have a very clear understanding of what are the issues on the ground, what are the challenges and opportunities, and how can the Office of the Secretary of Defense support the military departments and the people of Hawaii in getting to collaborative solutions.
So it's more like you're creating more of a straight line now. It's rather than playing the whole telephone effect where the end goal is kind of different from what it started with, And what I've learned also is that Hawaii is very unique in that it has all 4 branches here.
Yes.
Right? And I thought that was a normal thing. Like going to all these different areas, going to Japan, going to all these different, in the States. I always thought that was just a normal thing, but I learned that it's not a normal thing. How do you, with the HCC, do you work with each branch differently, or is it kind of the same across the board?
So the way the structure works is that the Office of the Secretary of Defense helps the Secretary in coordinating all the way across. So we work with each of the military departments. So when I say military department, I mean we work with the Army, we work with the Air Force, we work with the Navy, okay? And then in Hawaii, we also have a combatant command called Indo-Pacific Command. So Indo-Pacific Command is the command for the war fighter. So their job is to protect and defend Hawaii and the entire area of operations. And their job is also to, if we need to get into a battle or a war, Indo-PACOM's commander, Admiral Paparo, becomes the commander of all of the forces in our geographic area. Okay. So we work with the combatant command. We also work with each of the departments, and then we work with each of the installations and each of the commands supporting the combatant command. And through that, we're able to help the services, because they identify what are our land use needs, what do we need for training, how can we partner with community, how do we show that we're a contributing partner here, and we work with everybody across the board to but keep an eye on the big picture, right? Because each of the services are looking at what is their kuleana, right? And so Army looks at as a land force, right? Navy looks as an ocean force, or say, on the ocean, and also aviation. Air Force is aviation, right? And then Space Force is looking at all of our satellites and our space domain awareness, right? So if each of them are looking at their mission needs, there needs to be somebody, in addition to the warfighter, looking at, okay, what's the big picture for Hawaii, and who's doing what, and how do we match this with the concerns and priorities of Hawaii residents? Oh,
that's a lot to take care of. Yeah, and that's a lot of moving parts as well. You mentioned some of the things that are kind of at the center of discussion these days, right? When it comes to land use, Red Hill cleanup, and
right?
so forth. How does HCC fit into all of that?
So again, we're here to help coordinate in support of the military departments and services. So the reason why Hawaii Coordination Cell is in the portfolio of the Assistant Secretary for Energy Installations and Environment is because that portfolio includes all of real estate, all of land use, all of housing, all of energy, did I say cleanup? All of the cleanup, right? As well as all of the land, real estate, leasing, leases, right? So a lot of that overlaps with the key priorities for Hawaii, right? People say, clean up the mess, right? Clean up while you go, clean up what you're doing, right? People say, what is the impact on housing, right? So we have deputy assistant secretaries who are in charge of that. And so our office is able to talk with the key stakeholders, work with the military departments, and then work with the key coordinators in the Pentagon to try to begin to address that so that we're addressing at multiple layers and levels, right? So the thing about the telephone reference is it's not so much the message getting lost, but different people at different levels have different responsibilities and understanding, right? So it's not intentionally getting morphed as the message goes up. It's just when you have different kuleana and different kulana, different parts are important, right? So by doing it this way, we're able to connect directly and keep the message together so we can maintain the outcomes that we sought to do.
Can you share any events that where you saw that the military and the community come together, and there was alignment, because I feel like there's always like a struggle between, there's like a little more of a tension and conflict, and there's some alignment at some point, especially when it comes to emergency response or disaster preparedness and resilience.
So on Hawaii Island in particular, with Pohakuloa, the Army has what's called a mutual aid agreement with Hawaii County. And because the island is so large, right, and because Pohakuloa is in the middle, the Pohakuloa personnel are the first responders for everything from the 12-mile marker on the Hilo side to the 51-mile marker at the end of the Daniel K. Noe Highway, and then from the summit of Mauna Kea to the summit of Mauna Loa. So anything that happens in that area, car accident, lost hiker, just wildfire, anything that occurs, the Army responds first because they can get there faster than Hawaii County, and they coordinate, right? So whether it's fighting a wildfire where, for example, the military will call in and say, bring the bigger helicopters with the bigger buckets to help a community fight a fire, or whether it's a lost hiker or an accident, right? It's that level of coordination where Army and community are coming together. So it can be like, even if we're fighting, right? If that's my uncle who needs the help, like Army, you better help, right?
Exactly.
And Army feels like that's a person in need. We're here. Nobody's gonna stand around and say, "Well, you hurt my feelings last time." Right.
Oh, so interesting. And I think that's where it comes into this whole concept of being that leader and having that leadership and service, right? The sense of being of service. How has all these experiences that you've been having and this background, how has it changed or built upon your style of leadership and service?
Well, like I said, I was really lucky to work with Senator Kaka, but I also served for 3 years in the Army, and that was a total fluke. I had gone to law school. I had gone to college, interned with Senator. I went to law school just to go back to his office, and in between all of that, I had signed up the one-page application for the Army JAG Corps, because I was, in law school, you're practicing on all your interviews and you want to do good, right? And I got a commission. I didn't understand what it was, and I kind of just, that's funny. I thought it was like the draft. I had no idea if somebody commissioned you, it was a big thing. And I put it on the side, and I happened to have two bosses. I was law clerking for the Sentencing Commission at the time, and they said, you really should go into the JAG Corps. And I grew up like, the military was just like the people who block traffic when I'm trying to go to Kona, right? Like I had no interest in the military. And they said, why, you think you can handle?
Oh.
And so I was dared. So I did it. Like, just flip,
Yeah.
did it. And my family was like, you're going to do what? And I was like, oh, I'm going into the Army. So I did it. I learned a lot, right? And I learned different leadership while being in the Army that I have been able to bring out, right? Working for Senator Akaka, again, key leadership. And he put me in positions. I handled Native Hawaiian issues. So I handled all of the legal and political relationship things, the Akaka Bill, all of those kinds of things helped with the Compact of Free Association with the Pacific Islands, did judiciary and all the gun control, judicial nominations, all of those things, right? And in doing those issues, got to spend a lot of time coming back to Hawaii and getting yelled at, right?
Yeah.
Like, what you guys doing? Don't you know, right? And in doing that, you really learn how to listen, right? You really learn how to navigate and how to understand the different perspectives and where people are coming from. And I think that leads to action. So my style of leadership is really, how do we come together, and how do we help everybody to have a role, right? And how do we paddle together?
Yeah, it's beautiful because, you talk about kuleana and kulana, and sometimes it can get pretty heavy, especially when you find yourself in those situations where there is a lot of conflict and tension and pain, and frustration. Personally, how do you go about navigating that for yourself? Because it's a lot to take on, So how do you go and find yourself again and get rooted again?
I think I have a super strong family, like on both sides, right? I come from a family of educators and coaches, right? So, there's a lot of balance. There's a lot of listen. I also come from a family of people who are very vocal, right? So you cannot cry if somebody disagree or yell at you, right? So so you gotta adjust that. And then I've had a lot of guidance and help with connection, right? I mean, fundamentally, a connection to Aina, connection to place, right? Fundamentally, this place has been here a long time, right? And our presence as humans on these islands is like a blink of an eye in the continuum of things. So we got to try to do the best that we can, right? While we're here. So kind of take yourself too seriously. Kind of take, like, is it right? Like, if it's pono, we'll figure it out, right? And there will be signs that'll show us, right? The water will flow, things will grow, right?
The will erupt,
right,
all
right.
that stuff.
We have to pay attention to everything. And I know that's going to sound crazy for a federal employee, but, there's multiple layers and levels, and we need to pay attention.
You mentioned that with the HEC, how it also helps out with creating that awareness of the culture and the heritage and so forth. And I think that's also what many of the people who I've been talking to that's what they're learning when they come here, is that all the history and the heritage and the culture and the people, it's a little different when they get here, and they have to be in a different mindset when they come here. And you also mentioned, I remember when we were talking before, in Kuwait, right? We had to learn their culture, because it's just that level of respect. So that you have to have that level of respect in order to have these connections, to build connection, to build upon that bridge, because when people from the outside come in, there's always a little bit of a hesitation, and when that bridge is broken, it's very hard to rebuild it, and when you come across these bridges and these connections that kind of are a little bit shaky, how does HCC come in to just kind of make it a little more a little more stronger?
So again, we try to work in service, in support of the services. We don't come in and say like, okay, follow us, right? So, listening, like, why is it challenging? What has been happening, right, within the department? Talking to community, what has been your experience? What has been challenging? And then bringing people together to say, okay, here's what we're hearing here. Here's what we're hearing here. Is there room for beginning to address that? At the same time, working with community to help them understand what is the structure, right? I find when I'm working with Hawaii residents, a lot of times they're like, just tell me who's in charge. And I was like, okay, it's not that simple. I got to draw you a diagram.
The whole diagram comes out,
and it depends on for what and how, right? similarly in the military side, they're just explain this to us. So sometimes it's explaining internally. The perspective that you're encountering is because this has been an average Hawaii resident's experience with your service in this geographic area. And here's the context and the history. This is what you're walking into, right? So can you understand where they're coming from? So it's really kind of doing the work to help the people who belong at the table as opposed to taking over the table, right? Really, again, trying to create context, trying to create space so people can better understand each other. I have a good friend, Kuha'o, who likes to always, who uses this analogy, so I give him credit for it, right? But it's like creating the Wi-Fi passcode, right? So people can actually hear each other with the intent upon which they mean their words and actions versus, just being like, I don't trust you, and whatever you say, I know is just one shibai. So, right. So it's really helping the Wi-Fi passcode.
Yeah, and I think that's where like that building starts on, right? Is acknowledging where everyone's coming from and everybody understanding where one another are.
Yes.
Their experiences, their backgrounds, the context of things, because it's, again, you're going back to how you felt when you kind of approached Senator Kaka right there, right? Like you're just going in, very emotional, very like have a lot of frustration, rather than just taking the time to just acknowledge what each other are coming from, and then let's find some kind of common ground that we can at least work together on.
Right.
And I think that's for the work that you folks do, it's a very powerful thing to do because it's not an easy thing to do.
No.
And it doesn't come with, a little bit of a frustration on your part, or a lot of working long nights where you're kind of just wondering, how can I piece this thing together?
Right. Like, how do we create the common space, the common understanding, right? Like, where are they coming from? So just like how Senator said to me, when was the last time you talked to your papa? I'm like, what in the world are you talking about?
What does that have to do with this?
Right. It's that I get that reaction a lot, right? I'll ask a question to a military leader or to a community member, and they're like, you listening or what? I was like, no, bear with me. I'm just trying to understand so that we can figure out how, and is it even possible? I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but how?
Yeah, and it's that's the thing, is someone's got to try.
Yeah.
Someone's got to do the work.
Gotta try.
And you mentioned that HEC just been only for 2 years, right?
Yep. So Hawaii Coordination Cell was actually created like two years ago, but I started this past year. So it takes a while from the time they create to the time they get somebody on board.
Yeah, and given that it just started, and all the work that you have already been doing with the team and so forth, what kind of what would you say is a success in the next 5 years coming from HCC?
I think success is, one, giving people a sense of hope through actions.
Yes.
If they can see little things, like everybody wants to find the silver bullet to make it go boom. It's the little things, right? If we can see progress, whether it's on the military side doing things and the community side doing things, if everybody can begin to see the progress and we can begin to rebuild trust. So success for us is people being willing to get in the room and talk honestly.
Yeah.
Success for us is people being willing to listen, right? Like we all have the release valve, gotta let it out.
Yeah.
But then can you stay in the room once the release valve goes off? And are you willing to kind of work together?
Continue working together.
Right? As it pertains to the land leases, it's getting to collaborative solutions, right? People have very strong feelings, but helping to get to a point where we can understand the geopolitical threats, we can understand the reason why training is important, right? I was just watching Top Gun Maverick the other night, right?
Yeah.
And there's a part where they're training and then they drop the dud. It doesn't blow anything up, but it's the target practice, right? And then they go, and then when you see the real mission, it's blowing things up, right? It's being able to relate that, right? When we're watching the movie, we're all cheering for the guy, right? But when we're looking at training here, it's a totally different story,
I see.
right?
Yeah.
So how do we make those connections so that there's that level of understanding? And then one other story is that which was super powerful. We're having discussions. I've been part of a process called Kahoahoa between Hawaii Island residents and Army at Po'akoloa. And we're looking at the long-term relationship for all of Po'akoloa, not just the land leases. And one of the turning points in the early discussions was we had a commander at the time who is from Hawaii but had trained at Po'akoloa and had shared with the group. And the group is cultural practitioners, Hawaii residents, very diverse group, right? We had some litigants, etc. And he shared how he had gone to Afghanistan and watched his best friend blow up with an IED, and how he had to, as platoon leader, bring everybody together. And it was the training from Po'akoloa that brought everybody together. They felt a connection, they felt that place. And it was the first time I'd ever heard an Army person talk about the mana of the place. And that really shifted the discussion, because it was the realization that this place is special, not just here, right? That it contributes through the training in saving lives in other places. And I thought that was super powerful.
And I think it goes back to what Hawaii is all about, right? It's about being in that space where it strengthens people.
Yes.
So they can go out and serve, and so they can go out and help one another and uplift each other.
Yes.
And I think that's such a powerful space to create. And I think with the HCC, that's kind of the space that you're trying to create as well, right? For both sides.
Yes.
So that they can come in and just uplift not only themselves, but uplift the other side as well. And I think that's where the connection and the bridges start to build upon. And last question, because I feel like having Hawaii's voice inside of these policies, especially defense policies and everything, to the listeners out there, can you just share a little bit more about that? Like, why do you think it's important for Hawaii to have a voice within the defense?
You mean as a Hawaiian who's working in this position? I think it's important. I have the honor of having access to key decision makers and being able to explain history, to explain viewpoints, right? And to break down the boogeyman perspective of, people being afraid of community, or people having I get to help them understand Hawaiians don't all have the same views. And it's unfair for you to expect that as a Hawaiian, I'm going to have the same view as you, right? Like let's make it real, right? So I think it's helpful. There are other Hawaiians in the Department of Defense as well, but it's the opportunity to share the experiences as a Hawaii resident and also as a Kanaka Maoli to explain connection to place, right? And to break it down, to explain that there's science and technology in our ancestral knowledge, right? And to explain that our, quote, legends, or our oli and our mele, are ways that we remembered our oral history, but when you break it down and you look at it, it's very scientific, right? In terms of the kilo and the observations, right? And again, that's like the Wi-Fi passcode, right? Once there's that level of understanding, right, then it's like, oh, we speak the same language. We're doing the same thing. We care about the same place. And how do we share the mission moving forward?
Oh, that's amazing. I want to be really respectful of your time and energy, because I know you have a lot on your plate. And I just want to say mahalo for being here to just talk stories and help me understand a little bit more about all the work that goes on out there, and how can we better create that stronger bridge between the military as well as the community here in Hawaii. So mahalo for that.
Thank you, Daniel.
Ahui ho.
Ahui ho.